Hey there, this is Kenneth Moore, and you're now with Zion's Watchman Media. Okay, so in Matthew chapter 7, we are told to pray, "Give us this day our daily bread." Now, for sure that is speaking about the physical bread that one eats for the sustaining of one's own body, but it also has a spiritual application to it, for Christ, speaking of himself in John chapter 6, verse 35, said, "I am the bread of life." And in John chapter 1, verses 1 and verse 14, we are told that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Ladies and gentlemen, Jesus Christ is the Word of God. Therefore, the Word of God is that bread of life. Now, I find it very fascinating that in the Old Testament we have a story where God actually showed the ancient Israelites how they were to go out and gather their daily bread. And it has plenty of lessons contained therein that we would do well to pay attention to in this day and age. We read here, "And the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said unto them, Would God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full. For ye have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Then said the Lord unto Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go and gather a certain rate every day. And it shall come to pass that on the 6th day they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoarfrost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, It is manna, for they wist not what it was. And Moses said unto them, This is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat." Okay, so here the Israelites were traveling through the wilderness from the land of Egypt, their land of slavery, to Canaan, the promised land. But the people started to complain because they were craving and missing the rich and luxurious foods of Egypt, and they started to complain against Moses. But the Lord had an answer to all this. He told his servant that he would rain down bread from heaven to feed his people. He would spread a table in the wilderness, and this is exactly what he did. When the people went out the next morning, they saw this small round grain on the ground that looked like a coriander seed, and they called it manna, which means, "What is this?" So do you see it? Have you caught it yet? The same way that the ancient Israelites of old were to go out and to gather this manna is the same way that we, who are spiritual Israel, the church, are to go about to gather the Word of God, the bread of life. Now, the first lesson in the story of manna actually comes from the name itself, manna, which means, "What is this?" This heavenly manna was something completely different from anything that ancient Israel had ever tasted or even seen before, and it sustained them all throughout their wilderness journey. You see, the Bible is no different. There is no book on the planet like it, and it is what gives strength and power to the Christian. And this is why Christ said in Matthew chapter 4 that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. We are to chew on this book constantly till its teachings become fully digested into us and a part of who we are. You see, in the physical world, our bodies are made up of what we eat, and it is no less true in the spiritual sense. If we want to become strong Christians, we must take in this book constantly. It is the diet that God has selected for his people as they travel from this world of sin towards the heavenly Canaan. Okay, next lesson, temperance. The Israelites were only to gather as much manna as they could eat for that day, for we cannot just eat and eat and eat and then expect to be healthy. That would just make us gluttons. Man is to eat so that he will have strength, so that he can then go out and work. The same is true in the spiritual realm. God does not intend for us to just study all day, lock ourselves up in some cloister, and isolate ourselves from society. We are to study diligently, yes, but then we are to get up and work for the upbuilding of humanity. And notice that if any of the Israelites tried to save any of the manna over from one day to the next, except for on the Friday, which we'll explain in a moment, it would begin to stink and grow worms. And this was to teach them the lesson of faith, or the lesson of daily dependence upon God. You see, we cannot just live off of yesterday's experience. Every day is a new day, and every day we are to receive a fresh batch of the bread of life, a fresh experience with the Word of God. Now, to answer your question on why they were allowed to keep the manna from the Friday over to the next day, This was in honor of God's holy day, the Sabbath, which falls on the 7th day of the week, which is Saturday. And on the Friday, the Israelites were instructed to go out and to gather twice as much manna as they normally would, because on the Sabbath day, none would fall. And in this, we see a very beautiful threefold miracle. First, the double portion of manna that would fall on the Friday. Second, there would be no manna that would fall on the Sabbath day. And third, the extra manna from Friday to Sabbath would not grow worms and stink, but it would be actually preserved fresh and sweet. And this threefold miracle continued with Israel all throughout their wilderness journeying for 40 years. And it was to impress upon them heavily the sanctity of God's holy day, the Sabbath. And this threefold miracle also points us back to the fact that the law of God and the Sabbath specifically was not created at Mount Sinai just for the Jews, for these events had not even taken place yet. It points to the fact that the law of God and the Sabbath were actually from the beginning, and they were actually meant for all mankind. And ultimately, this threefold miracle points us back to Christ, who was the symbol of that true manna. You see, Christ died on the Friday, was in the grave on the Sabbath, and he did not appear again till the first day of the week. And it was on the Sabbath after Christ died that the disciples were to rest and to trust in what Christ had provided, salvation for all mankind from sin and death, and that he would rise again on the first day of the week. The Sabbath ultimately is an acknowledgement of salvation by faith alone in what Christ has done. Nothing that I do, it is only by what Christ has done for me that I am saved. In this threefold miracle, we see a very beautiful picture of justification by faith alone. Therefore, to reject the Sabbath is ultimately to reject the message of justification by faith alone, and to set up another day in the place of the Sabbath and to make that the holy day of rest, such as Sunday, is to say that one can be saved through some other means outside of Christ's death. You can be saved through some devising of your own. And it is a denial of the sacrifice of Christ. The keeping of Sunday as the Sabbath is ultimately an acknowledgement of justification by works. Now, let me ask you, do you know of any churches or of any religious bodies that have rejected God's seventh-day Sabbath and have accepted another day in the place of it? And do you know of one system in particular that claims to have changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, not based off of the Bible, but simply based off of the church's authority, and claims this change as its mark of authority over the Bible? Brothers and sisters, come out for my people. Think on these things. Brothers and sisters, the only way that we will not be deceived in these end times from the deceptions like the ones I've just mentioned is if we eat daily the bread of life. And this must be a daily, continual thing. And we cannot allow anything from distracting us from going out and gathering that bread, whether that be spouses, family, friends, entertainment, jobs, whatever. All must be placed secondary. We must eat this bread of life if we want to stand. It is the only food that will sustain us in these end times. Every day, God offers us the opportunity to go out and eat it. But the question is, will we take it? Will we go out and take the initiative and gather the heavenly bread that God has given for us? For it's not just going to fall out of the sky into our laps. I pray that we will go out and that we will gather it though, and that we will taste and see that the Lord is good, and that blessed is the man that trusteth in him. This has been Kenneth Moore from Zion's Watchman Media. And if you like this video and you want to receive more content like this, be sure to subscribe below and to hit the bell below so that you get notifications to new videos. And as always, until next time.